listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Well, happy Friday evening, folks. We've made it to the end of the week once again. It seems like I say this all the time, but I do it at least once a week. Happy Friday. And welcome to the show tonight. This is Scotty Roberts, your host on my program, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com, where you can come on over and hear the audio version of this show and find the place where you can listen to it in several different outlets. Also, come on over and watch the live video stream, the live video simulcast of this program. And that's over on my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. And you can join the chat room when you're there, inhabited by fellow Intrepids. And even if you're not an Intrepid, if you're just trying the show out, come on over, join the conversation. You don't even have to talk. You can just watch the conversation that's going on and see if you want to step into it at any point. And they talk about this show. It's already starting right now. Or they talk about all different kinds of other things that groups of people talk about. So go on over and enjoy yourself over at the simulcast on my YouTube channel. And again, that's youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. And there's in the news this morning when I woke up, because it came out at about 1 a.m. this morning, is the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and his wife have both been tested positive with the coronavirus. And now they're still well. They have the virus, but it hasn't affected them adversely yet. And so they are carrying out their duties, but they are now under a quarantine. They're being watched, or isolation. I don't remember which one it is. I think isolation is when you have the virus. Quarantine is when they're watching you to see that you don't get the virus, or something to that effect. And so there for the next couple of weeks, they will be under quarantine. We'll just use that. And we wish the president and his wife, the first lady, the best. Their son, Barron, I don't know that he's contracted it, but I know there's one other person in employ at the White House that has it. And so we wish them the best. Now, I found it very interesting, the broad array of responses you get from people out there. And this ties in really tightly with what we were talking about yesterday, with what we're going to talk about today. I've seen everything from wishing the president and the first lady well, to wishing them dead, hoping they'll die, and to a broad array of things. And when you point that out to somebody, you go, hey, that's pretty heartless, that's pretty intolerant of the side of the equation that's supposed to be the loving and tolerant left. And they usually will come across with an excuse for it, saying, well, I was just joking. And saying, oh, okay, you're joking. Boy, that's what they would say if it was Biden who got it, or that's what you guys would say if Hillary got it. And I'm saying, wow, that's a leap to take. That's justification for your bad action. So if it's wrong for one side, it's wrong for the other side. This is a piece of logic that I latched onto, which is not very profound, but it's so simple that people don't seem to get it. They walk right past it. And that is the logic that says, if you declare something wrong for another person, then it should also be wrong for you. Now, I'm talking about matters of morality, matters of values, matters of the way we deal with each other out in the world in general. So if I say to you, it's wrong for you to, it's wrong for you to call my wife a blithering idiot. And then I turn around and call her a blithering idiot, but justify it because she's my wife. I can say whatever I want, and you guys said it too. You would have said it of your own wife or spouse. You know what that is? That's justification for your actions. That's the true hypocrisy. And we've seen it in other things going on. That's maybe an imperfect example, but we've seen it where we've said, it's wrong for President Trump to act this way. And we'll say, but didn't Obama act the same way? Yeah, but you would have said the same thing. And backwards and forwards. And it's just this circular argument. It's people within your camp, within your point of view, within your in-group, that in part of your group that we talked about. They're not the out group. They're the in group. It's okay for you, but it's not okay for the other guys. So when I say I wish the president and his wife the best, you don't have to be a supporter of Donald Trump. You don't have to be a Republican. You don't have to be a conservative. You can be the antithesis of all of those things and still wish he and his wife the best and hope that this thing doesn't kill him. Then you can move on and go, no, I still disagree with him politically, but I don't wish them ill. Now, this is the point we've come to in our country. This is the definition of the polarization, the definition of the division that exists out there. That we are willing to wish someone dead because we don't like their politics or their policies. I've had more people I've seen today say, well, he deserves to get sick because he handled COVID so poorly. And I asked them to point out what it is they believe he handled poorly. And usually nobody can say anything. I've had some people say things like, well, you know, he was a denier of mask protection. And I say, well, there's a lot of people that don't believe that. It's not just the president. Why should he default to wearing a mask because some people say it's good when other people say it isn't? He's not defaulting to either position. He has brought along a mask. He has worn a mask. You've seen him do it. You saw him do it at I think it was at the end of the debate the other night. Or during the debate, he held up his mask. He says, I've got one. He says, I'm not wearing it now because I'm standing on stage in front of a camera. So, all of these justifications people put out there for the ways that they act and the ways that they do things. And many of these, I've had at least two people today that said something to me, well, I wouldn't expect any less from you being that you listen to Fox News. And I'm like, you know what? It doesn't matter what news I listen to. As long as I am able to gauge what I hear and weigh it against common sense. And for the record, I listened to a couple of excerpts from Fox News. I don't have Fox News. I don't have cable at my home. We use Netflix, we use Amazon, we use YouTube, things like that. We don't have cable television, so I don't have cable news. And I do read a lot of news, and I do absorb a lot of news. I listen to some of the things on Fox News. I tend to avoid news outlets that I believe are biased against the president. So, yeah, there is a little bit of that. I listen to Fox News. So what? I have enough intelligence to be able to determine what I think is accurate and what is not accurate, based on all the news I put together. So, having said that, let's move on from that. This ties in perfectly with the things that we've been talking about and the things we're going to talk about again today. And actually, before this even came out last night, the topic for today, sitting right here on my computer, has been open. I thought I was going to hit it yesterday morning, is fake news, echo chambers, and filter bubbles. And it's a kind of a survival guide to walk your way through these things. Internet misinformation biases our beliefs. And is it time to unplug? You got to ask yourself that question. Time to unplug from some of it? Who's more foolish? Here, let me do it in his voice. See if I can do him. Who's more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows him? That's Obi-Wan Kenobi in the original Star Wars movie. Who's more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows him? And so right now we're kind of experiencing, and you're going to get some people who will even talk about this being the rise of AI, artificial intelligence, that a lot of this is being done and nobody's actually manipulating it. It's doing it on its own. But talk about the rise of the machines. Let's look back a little bit and look back at the a bit of a timeline of the election, of the last election in 2016. Brain Dead was a series that was on the Sci-Fi Channel, I believe, and it portrayed our modern state of highly polarized political discourse as the result of a conspiratorial plot on the part of space alien insects intending a hostile takeover of our planet. And the alien bugs, so the storyline in this series went, were infecting the brains of U.S. senators, causing them to abandon any spirit of compromise in favor of a violent conflict so that we would kill each other off, paving the way for a new world order. And so while that premise is intentionally far-fetched for comic effect, current events, think about it for a second, current events now actually kind of seem to be suggesting something else very familiar, but increasingly real. Only it's not space aliens that are wresting control of our brains, it's the internet. It's the internet and everything we see on the internet. We've heard about the dangers of using cell phones while driving, making it 23 times more likely to crash your car and resulting in 1.6 million accidents a year. Now, lately we've been told that the continuous use of mobile devices has resulted in an epidemic of text neck, a hunchbacked arthritic syndrome that might be best described as a posture of slavery to our artificial intelligence overlords. You know, that position like this, always looking at our phones, chins to our chests. Now, the headline suggests that a combination of fake news, fake posts, fake tweets, consumed with our online echo chambers and filter bubbles might be intentionally feeding our brains a narrowly biased view of the world. And so increasingly, the warped version of reality that we see online isn't reality at all. In a blog post called "Does the Internet Promote Delusional Thinking?" there was someone who wrote about the way our online world is constructed, and it provides a technological enhancement of confirmational bias, our built-in neural bias towards preferring information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs. And you could cite the work of a Michela Del Vicario and her colleagues, whose 2015 paper, "The Spreading of Misinformation Online," demonstrated this echo chamber effect on Facebook. Elie Pariser, author of the Filter Bubble, How the New Personalized Web is Changing What We Read and How We Think, described how those bubbles likewise have the potential to confine us within a web of one. Now, less than a year later, echo chambers, filter bubbles, confirmation bias all became household words in the lead-up to the 2016 election. Look at it now with the lead-up and just a few weeks away from the 2020 election. Stephen McCrumman painted a compelling portrait of online confirmation bias in her Washington Post article, "Finally, Someone Who Thinks Like Me." In it, McCrumman told the story of Melanie Austin, a Pennsylvania woman who repeatedly sought and found online evidence to support her own suspicions and other things she'd heard, such as that President Obama founded ISIS, or that First Lady Michelle Obama was actually born a man. Have you heard that one? That Donald Trump would win the presidential election in a landslide. So many Washington Post readers probably dismissed the article as a tale of some isolated, paranoid country bumpkin, but no doubt may have reconsidered that dismissal after the election results came in. So the Sunday before the election, the New York Times, who we talked about yesterday, published an article by Jim Rutenberg called "Media's New Challenge: Overcoming the Threat of Fake News." Funny that coming from the New York Times, as they become the main purveyor of fake news. And that article warned of the proliferation of bogus news articles intended to influence voting. Now, after Trump emerged with a victory, you could see how the consumption of fake news within echo chambers had allowed liberals to be taken by surprise by the end of the election outcome, resulting in a kind of acute post-Trump stress disorder. And so in the days that followed, fake news became a ubiquitous headline with a flurry of subsequent articles suggesting that fake news had gotten Trump elected and that websites like Facebook were to blame. And also now you see just the opposite. Fake news is what is trying to turn the tide against President Trump. Vox writer, and Vox is not a site I read that much of, but I read from them every now and then, very anti-Trump type of a website, not journalistic at all. The writer Timothy Lee reported that Facebook engagement with fake news articles outpaced engagement with mainstream news articles. By the eve of the election, John Markoff followed with a New York Times piece that noted that those fake news articles had been generated by an automated army of pro-Donald Trump chatbots. And Washington Post writer Caitlin Dewey published an interview with Paul Horner, a prolific faux news author, who claimed, "I think Donald Trump is in the White House because of me." So you had all of that coming from that side of the equation. The other side of the equation was the buildup, and even we see it even now, all the fake news that attempts to turn the tide against the president. So by most accounts, the internet has now been credited with playing a significant role in determining the outcome of the 2016 presidential race, and some say handed Donald Trump the 45th presidency of the United States. What's interesting about that is how many people believed he wasn't going to win, that Hillary was going to win, and all the negative press against the president. So if artificial intelligence overlords are indeed behind it all, election night of 2016 may have, in retrospect, been Judgment Day, in a quiet, insidious war intended to destroy the human race. Now, you could take that as being something that is anti-Trump. You can take that as being pro-Trump. What you see out there, however, is there's an insidious underbelly, if you will, that is working very hard to sway your minds. Sometimes you see it as overtly as Facebook. We all like being on Facebook. We all like chatting. We all like keeping up. We're all drawn to it still. Yet we see Facebook as something that is now one of the greatest in declaring themselves fact checkers. They have become not a platform for people to share their minds openly, but a platform that must fall underneath the scrutiny of their established fact checkers. And those fact checkers will sometimes fact check you when you aren't even stating anything that should be fact checked. So they're as fact checking as much as it'd be like saying, if I came up and said, "Hey, I woke up today and it's partly sunny outside," the Facebook fact checkers might mark your post as saying, "There is dubious information in this post because we found in the area where this person lives, it is actually partly cloudy, not partly sunny." That's the way it's getting right now. So there's internet misinformation. Why do we need to worry about it? On a more serious and less partisan note, let's be clear, fake news, echo chambers, filter bubbles, confirmation bias are not exclusive tools or traps or foibles of the right or the left. They're vulnerabilities for all of us on either side of the political fence. And why should we care? Because consuming misinformation within the narrow confines of our online worlds inhibits our ability to know what's true, to make choices based on the most accurate information. to make informed decisions about what to believe, and to resist the many invisible forces that might not have our best interests in mind. Political differences aside, do we really want to allow ourselves to be misled by Russian trolls, Macedonian teenagers? Do we really want to allow ourselves to be constantly manipulated by corporate advertising? If we allow ourselves to become passive vessels of a daily deluge of online information, we're never going to learn about our perceived opponents, whether in the spirit of understanding and reaching across the aisle to unite the country, or in efforts to mount a resistance or win an ideological war. If we allow ourselves to become slaves to confirmation bias on steroids, we're going to lose the ability to distinguish between what's real and what's not real. Truth is going to be regarded as something that's endlessly debatable, if not completely unknowable. And so, in short, we're never going to learn anything. And is that how we want to live our lives? Do we want to live our lives being completely unable to determine what is fact from what is fiction? What is truth from what is a lie? Assuming we're not already there, what can be done to avoid this fate? And efforts to enhance the quality of online news are already underway by some of the major fountains of misinformation. And although Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg made headlines a few years ago by denying that his creation played a role in the outcome of the presidential election, and both Facebook and Google have since claimed that they plan to withhold advertising from fake news sources, effectively preventing them from gaining easy access to viewers' eyes. And Facebook says it's now also developing a way to flag fake news sources, and they've already gone into establishing fact-checking of their own within their own ranks. The only problem that we have seen with that thus far is that we're finding that there is an overwhelming bias in one political direction. So while Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg and Google have come out and said they're going to do these things, they have actually worsened the problem. A similar plugin called Fib was recently developed by 3 college students. If there's a continued demand for such products, more will surely be on the way. So maybe there's hope at the root of the problem for an improvement in the quality of our online information. But ultimately, it might be up to us. We, the individuals, the partakers, the users, the practitioners of information, to arm ourselves against misinformation by becoming more discriminating consumers of what we see online. And I'm going to discuss here when we come back from the break, because that's on us right now already, how we might go about doing just that. How to safeguard against online misinformation. It's kind of a survival guide. So sit tight. We're going to be back in a couple of minutes, and we'll pick this up right where we left off.
Are you looking for a really awesome and amazing graphic designer? How about an illustrator or a photographer? This is Rainey Roberts, and I wanted to tell you how you can get my designer, illustrator husband, Scotty Roberts, to work for you on your project. Do you have an awesome self-published book but no cover, or even worse, a cover that really sucks? Do you need a kick-ass logo for your company or some f***ing awesome graphic designs for your ads or website? Then get in touch with my husband for the best f***ing awesome kick-ass design and illustration. He knows his stuff, and he's been at this for more years than I've been alive. Go to ScottAllenRoberts.com. That's Scott with 2 T's, ALANROBERTS.com to take a look at his online portfolio of work, or call 651-468-8115. Now go out and kick some ass with some kick-ass graphic design.
Hire my dad so he can take me to Disneyland.
All right, gang, thanks for sitting on through that break. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to my show, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. Come on over, see all the goodness that's Odyssey Radio, all the different outlets where you can hear this show in its audio format. You can also join the video simulcast of this show over on my YouTube channel and join the live chat room that's going on there right now. That's over at youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. Come on over and join the chat room now as we finish the discussion of this topic tonight. And you know, every once in a while I get a glimpse of the camera shining back at me as I'm doing the video side of this. And one thing that's most distressing as I get a little bit older is the most rapidly advancing baldness on the top of my head. And, you know, if I could wish for anything back from my youth other than my, I don't know, my leaner body fat and my being in shape and, being able to hold my own, would be the regaining of my hair. It's getting so thin on top. And I noticed that. So I don't know how you put up with it over on the video channel. But thanks for being here anyway, despite my devolving hairline. Anyway, that was for free, by the way. It's because I just saw myself in my camera monitor screen. So let's move on from there. We've been talking about yesterday and again today. And if you weren't here in the first segment, we're talking about this whole idea of echo chambers, this whole idea of fake news, filter bubbles, echo chambers. What's an echo chamber? An echo chamber, that's the place where you go to get only those who think like-minded like you to give you your information. And I've been accused even today in talking about, I thought it was pretty straightforward about the president contracting COVID, and I said I wish him and his wife the best. And everybody else has been making comments, and everybody makes their disparaging comments from "we hope he dies" to he's denied so much it's just karma. And I say, why is it karma? Because he chose to believe one track of information when there's conflicting information out there. Oh, you obviously get your news from Fox News. Why don't you try doing a little research? Now imagine that. These are obviously people who don't know me very well. Those of you, my listeners, when somebody says to me, I should go try doing a little research, Scotty Roberts, I think you can see why I think that's a little funny. And, I hate to blow them out of the water, but don't tell me to go do my research. Anyway, how do we safeguard against online information? There's a survival guide, so to speak, and I want to go through a couple of things with you. First of all, the first way to save yourself and safeguard yourself from online misinformation is to, number one, learn to recognize fake news for what it is. That means don't just look at the frickin' headline, people, and go, oh, I gotta post that because of that great headline. or I'm going to believe that. America's had this long-time affection for fake news. The National Enquirer has been going since 1926. Did you know that rag is 94 years old? The print edition of the World Weekly News ran for 30 years, keeping us informed about aliens at Roswell, the faked deaths of Elvis, or the discovery of Bigfoot before shutting down in 2007, only to resurrect itself as an online-only publication in 2009. Now, those periodicals have always provided some levity to the daily grind, if only when we glanced at them at the supermarket checkout lane, which I gotta admit I did a few times. There were times the Enquirer actually made me pick up the rag and look at it. Oh, what's that all about? And I gotta check that article out. But few of us have ever mistook them for actual news. It's very rarely. I do know a few people that read the Enquirer and go, hey, I read that in the Enquirer. Did you see that? I believe it. Well, there might be some kernels of truth. That's like my old seminary professor, Dr. Ailing, once said to me way back when I was in seminary. He says, Scotty, even every mythology that exists has at its core, at its headwaters, some kernel of truth at the core. And so in the internet age, however, demand for fake news has driven up supply. And with millions of links that indiscriminately alternate between opinions and well-researched facts popping up in a single Google search, the ability to discern between reliable information and misinformation has been all but lost. So Stephanie McCrummen's Washington Post article gave us an inside look at an individual who had trouble in that regard. But sometimes it seems as if an entire generation has come to rely on Google searches for easy answers, while never being taught how to actually weed through the chaff for reliable information. Perhaps the reward of confirmation bias when we find something that tells us, see, I was right, is just too strong to avoid out there. Now, for me, I will admit to doing this. There are times where I hear an issue and it's about the president, and I start hearing it from all the major news outlets that are very anti-Trump. So my red flag goes up, and I say, I'm only seeing this information from sites that traditionally have something very negative to say about the president. So I will go on a deeper search. Then I realize I'm looking at Google, who is also very anti-Trump. And if I will put in any search criteria about the president to try to see what the truth is, I see 36 articles in the first top 36 spots that are negative about the president. There's no magic to that word number 36. I'm just saying I could go through 2 and 3 pages at the top of the list and find no articles or no news source outlets that are any different than what the anti-Trump news media sites are saying. So I will dig a little deeper, and I'll keep going deeper, and finally I'll find a site that says, no, that's fake, and here's why. And I will tell you something, I tend to start believing those sites as opposed to the plethora of other anti-Trump sites because I already know what their bias is. Give me a site that is not biased, and I'll show you a site that's going to give you information that might be a bit more reliable. So in scientific publishing, the proliferation of online journals that operate on a predatory open access model is known as a known problem, whereby authors pay out of pocket for publication, often getting articles printed online with minimal peer review or editorial discretion. In response, University of Colorado librarian Jeffrey Bale has created a website called Scholarly Open Access that maintains a list of such publishers to help both researchers and readers to avoid the bad apples in scientific research. Now, it's been suggested that we might benefit from a similar watchdog for online news sources. And in an effort to fill that niche, Melissa Zimdars, an assistant professor of communication at Merrimack College, recently published an extensive list of fake news sources. But conservatives were quick to criticize her. Her inclusion of websites like Breitbart and InfoWars. And she's since taken it down after being subjected to harassment and threats and being far too challenged when it wasn't even harassment and threats. So aside from the challenge of weeding through the sheer number of online news sources, the question of who will watch the watchers will inevitably plague the blacklisting of online information sources or any related proposals for developing systems to rate them. Now, this site by Melissa Zimdars, who's to say she has the ability to weed out what is fake news and what is real news? What is the news you should listen to? What is the news you shouldn't listen to? Paul Horner, the professional fake news writer mentioned earlier, he said this about consumers online. Honestly, people are definitely dumber nowadays. They just keep passing stuff around. Nobody fact-checks anything anymore. I mean, that's how Trump got elected, according to him. He just said whatever he wanted, and people believed everything. And when the things he said turned out not to be true, people didn't care because they already had accepted it. It's really scary. I've never seen anything like it. And I got to tell you that I'm going to go beyond his quote. He is obviously somebody who doesn't agree with Trump. I'll go beyond his quote and say it doesn't apply to just the president. It applies to just about everybody making a public face or making a public statement either pro or against Donald Trump or against the things that Donald Trump puts forward. There is two sides to that coin, folks. New but as of yet unpublished research suggests that fact-checking websites can help people to revise their misinformed opinions rather than digging their heels in as part of a confirmation bias and the backfire effect. However, claims of biased fact-checking sites abound, and the proliferation of fake fact-checking sites is also inevitable. So online consumers will still have to learn to separate good and bad fact-checking sites and to seek out unbiased sources. So again, it might end up being you as an individual has to become shrewd. You have to be fair, balanced enough to figure things out. Fortunately, anyone can learn how to spot fake news, such as being wary of unfamiliar domain names, especially those that end in .lo and com.co, and researching the source of a website by checking it on Snopes.com, which is also found to be, at times, a fake fact-check news source. Wikipedia sometimes, but Wikipedia is also open to people contributing. So there is this sound advice. If a news story makes you really angry, it's probably a good idea to keep reading about the topic via other sources to make sure the story you read wasn't purposefully trying to make you angry with potentially misleading or false information in order to generate shares and ad revenue. You ever notice that? Look at the headlines sometimes. You go, and they piss you off. And then you'll click on it and you'll find very little in the story that actually has to do with the headline. It's like this whole thing with Trump's taxes earlier in the week. Whole tax thing by the New York Times. What does the headline of that say? I remember when I saw the headline. Trump income tax dump reveals he didn't pay more than $750 over the last decade. Well, they mentioned that in the article, but they also mentioned their own fact-checking, and they also mentioned that he paid $750 because he had prepaid $1 million. You remember, if you file taxes and you're going to owe taxes and you want to push that out, your filing date, you can do that, but you've always got to first estimate the amount of tax you're going to pay and then pay it in advance until you do your taxes and find out if it balances out. That's exactly what Trump did. He paid $1 million in 2016. He paid $4.2 million to the IRS in 2017. But he only ended up paying $750 per year on those because it balanced out. He ended up paying the tax and only owed $750. So you start looking at the stories and finding out what is there in the headline that makes it clickbait, makes people click on the story to read it. And something I've noticed is that Facebook allows an awful lot of that clickbait with stories that are anti-Trump. But if you see a more conservative article, they disallow those articles. There is a bias even in the fact-checking at Facebook, and we've all become very aware of this. So number 2 is limit your use of social media for news and consider paying for something better. Pay for better news. Subscribe to something. Oh my God, people, drop the $12 a year to get good information. Whatever the site may be. $2 a month, whatever it might be. Free news is usually news that can manipulate you. It's not that paid for news doesn't manipulate you either. But this is something, I'm just going to say a pet peeve here. I know when I started Intrepid magazine back in 2011, 9 years ago, I was leaving TAPS Paramag at the time and going to found my own magazine. I had thousands of people say they would subscribe to my magazine. Oh, we so look forward to what you're going to bring to us, Scotty Roberts. We'll subscribe. That was all on Facebook. And so I went ahead and I launched that magazine. Do you know how many subscriptions I sold to those thousands of people? 12. There's so much lip service on Facebook. Don't trust it. There's the real fake news. Hey, I'll support you. Anyway, that's a pet peeve of mine, you can tell. Because of that. Now, we did get subscribers. We got them from other areas. We paid for advertising. So, anyway, there you go. If you start a new business and you use Facebook to promote yourself in your free posts, did you know that Facebook also limits the number of people who can see that? They look at the algorithm, they look at the content of what you're saying, and if you're pushing something for somebody to buy into your idea or buy your product, you'll get 8 people will see that post as opposed to 800 who will see a post on something else. So let's move on. So David Mickelson, who's a writer at Snopes, noted that while some news is fake and bad news, including news delivered with a clear political slant, can be just as much of a problem. The best news, as former ABC anchorman Ted Koppel recently reminded us, is based on the old-fashioned concept of objective reporting. But that may be something of a lost art nowadays. And even Snopes, whom David Mickelson worked for, Snopes is not a reliable source for factually based fact-checking. They have a bias of their own, and it's been established. So in order to incentivize the return of objectivity into the landscape of news, it might be necessary for us to pay for it, to subscribe to something. We might all therefore consider subscribing to a reputable news source. The New York Times reported an increase of over 40,000 subscribers 4 years ago. But if you're a liberal, consider another subscription to the National Review to balance things out. See the following sources to escape the echo chambers. That would be other sources like National Review. I like to look at Business Insider. I like to look at the Wall Street Journal. All of these, and there are many others that you can look at that are going to offer you something a little different that will contrast the bias. And if you're watching Fox News and you only consume Fox News, Why not get a subscription to the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, to balance things out? Now, I already know the New York Times exists for one reason, been building over the last 4 years, and that is to discredit and delegitimize the presidency of Donald Trump. And they're fighting heavily against having him reelected. That is not journalism. That's opinion writing. So if you want the opinions, go ahead and subscribe to the New York Times. Consider a less partisan-leaning publication like The Economist, or consider The Week in an easily digestible summary of all types of news. The Washington Examiner is one. Consider these other sources as places to get some of your news, to balance it out, not to just camp there, but find different places to obtain your news. If you're going to share any information at all, if you're not going to share information, I wouldn't worry so much about it, unless you just want to be informed. Now, this can be a helpful way to keep abreast of a broad range of information that allows you to find the source material when you're particularly interested in a specific topic. I used to like listening to the BBC and reading the BBC, and even they have started to become a little more biased. Tim Wu, the author of The Attention Merchants, The Epic Scramble to Get Inside Our Heads, notes that beyond politics, the biased information that we're fed online is as much a byproduct of the e-commerce business model that relies on advertising to make his money. He's therefore a proponent of avoiding online manipulation by paying for something that's more tailored to serve you than tailored the other way around, you serving their advertisers. So if you really want change, you probably have to pay for stuff. Pay for content. Some people are like, oh my God, I have to pay? But people do pay. They pay for Netflix. Don't you pay for Netflix? Don't you pay for HBO? Don't you pay for other types of things? Sometimes they even subscribe to newspapers and magazines. So generally speaking, when you pay for stuff, it has more of your interests at heart. In other words, a lot of the websites are always serving two masters. They're both trying to get you entertained enough to stay there or to click on things, but to also then make it a good platform for advertising. So I have a sort of a plea to people who want to change these sorts of things. It's like, maybe just suck it up and start paying for something. It's only a few bucks, folks, usually. Now, every time you click on a like button on another site, you've told Facebook that you're doing that. And so therefore, advertisers know who their fan base is. When you decide to like something over on Facebook, you may feel you're innocently putting out your preferences, but actually, you're delivering something of enormous value, which is indicating that you essentially like to be advertised to by this company. Now, that's, of course, when you're liking company posts. And so it's so funny that the internet has become a series of traps where you do innocent things like give your name or address or indicate preference. I like this thing. And therefore, you open yourself up to a deluge of advertising based on those stated preferences. And that's what you're doing. You're signaling who you are as a consumer. And even now, you don't even have to click on anything. Now, your phones, your computer, they all read your preferences and the things you look at. On my phone, I looked at an advertisement one day, and I didn't buy anything. I just clicked back out of it. On my computer, within the hour, I started seeing ads from that same company that I'd never seen before. So it's all tied in together. So Google, Facebook, Twitter, the whole set of companies essentially knows all your weaknesses. They essentially know how to manipulate you in subtle ways in order to have you do things you might not otherwise do. And so the bottom line is that free online news isn't free. So rather than pay the cost of misinformation, consider investing in something a little better. Now, you can also subscribe to something and pay money out and still get misinformation. The problem is that the information you're getting now by clicking and liking news articles, that's how they make money. And they draw you in as clickbait. So, number 3, make a conscious effort to learn outside of your echo chamber. And you be the nice person in the process. Something I strive for. Rocky said to me once, brother, he says, I don't have the patience you have. I'd tell people to F off really quick. And, I do that deliberately. It's not because I don't want to tell somebody to fuck off. It's that I want to maintain my approachability. If I want to talk to somebody, if I want to convince somebody that what I'm saying is true or right or factual, the best way to do it is to not get riled up so fast. Now, I take people to task and I'll say, okay, you've just said something. Why don't you show me your source material on that? Tell me how you drew that conclusion. So I had somebody today really degrade my daughters. And it was on this post about the president and COVID. And I said, you know what? I said, I disagree with my daughters a lot on politics. But if you're going to attack my daughters, I'm going to get you fucked off really quick. So I don't put up with that bullshit. And so you got to be nice. So in an effort to curb hate speech, Twitter recently suspended several high-profile alt-right accounts, including that of Richard Spencer, a prominent leader in the white nationalist movement. But that move has been criticized for censoring free speech, and it already seems to have resulted in a backlash proliferation of new fake accounts. With unfettered online talk around us, it might be more useful to learn how to filter through it all on our own, rather than relying on individual websites to do it for us. I want to say to Facebook, and I've done it several times, don't block from my view the ability for me to look at something and determine whether or not I believe it is true or fake. I've got a brain. I know how to use it. If you are going to tell me what I can and cannot view, you are doing something that is more fascist than anything that you want to call fascism. So likewise, a 2015 article published instructions on how to systematically find and delete friends who support Donald Trump on Facebook. That's bad advice for the informed consumer of online information. Learning to recognize and avoid fake news is a worthwhile endeavor, but with opinions increasingly masquerading as news these days, we also need to keep ourselves aware of opinions that diverge from our own. There was a blog I read once called Understanding Post-Trump Stress Disorder, Why Liberals Didn't See It Coming. And there's this advice to escape our own echo chambers and filter bubbles. Don't inform yourself about what's going on in the world by relying exclusively on, and I know this is not going to be a newsflash to you guys, do not exclusively rely on your Facebook or Twitter feeds. Stay friends with the people whose divergent views and comments sometimes drive you crazy. If you're a liberal, keep tabs on what's being said over at Fox News and read the Wall Street Journal and the National Review. If you're a conservative, keep tabs on what CNN is saying. And sites like that. MSNBC, I don't know if anybody even listens to MSNBC anymore, but the Rolling Stone magazine. Keep tabs on what's being said. Hell, for the next 4 years after this election, you might want to even take a peek at InfoWars once in a while. Well, InfoWars has kind of been dropped, but forcibly dropped. But Alex Jones is still out there. Keep your eyes open on these people. I kind of like Alex Jones. I don't agree with everything he says. I think he's a little extreme sometimes. But you know what? I think he's right a lot of times as well. But that's my opinion. Take a look at that. Take a look at how Breitbart has done things. You know what? If you're liberal, subscribe to Breitbart. It's free, I believe. I know I get their stuff. I just signed up and I see their articles come in my email. What's the other one? The Blaze. Go ahead and listen to The Blaze. Look at The Blaze. It's Glenn Beck's site. He doesn't write all the articles. He's got all kinds of people who submit articles to that site. And the same in reverse. So keep tabs on the other side. Don't block. I see people all the time say to me, yeah, I already blocked that person because I disagree with their views. Don't block people just because you disagree with them. For Pete's sake, how are you ever going to learn what somebody else has to say? And we might say, well, I already know what they have to say. Well, engage them in conversation. Find out why they believe what they say they believe. And you know what, folks? We're out of time. I ran way over. So we got to go. We'll pick this up tomorrow or Monday. Be here on Sunday at